All right. So we're here to talk about something a little bit different, something that's been on our mind for a long time and has had a pretty big impact on how we've kind of structured our services as a business. And so we want to talk about it. We want to get it out there. Some people might agree with us, some won't. But if you're a marketeer, if you're in marketing or branding or growth or whatever you want to call it, um, you probably want to listen to this episode. And I'd be really curious to see what people think about what we're about to say. And I think also like a little disclaimer, we're venting
That's
and
not like us.
and it's also like it's a changing opinion. Like we might have an opinion today, but that's based on what we're living in the moment. And so that opinion might change over time. So please don't judge us.
So what's the episode called?
So this episode, we just wanted to talk about the fact that most organizations do not deserve CMOs. So most organizations do not have, in our opinion, the right to hire such senior C-level, whatever SVP level marketeers in their organization. And we just want to break down why.
Yeah.
And for the record, we created an organization called DUCKLIFE, which is basically your CMO on demand. So there is a bias, of course, but we created that service because we don't believe that organizations should have them in-house. And let's break that down. So a lot of this is based on experience. So we've had senior roles in marketing. I've had a couple of the most senior roles in marketing in some big organizations, Karim being one of them, for example. And over time, as I've jumped from, let's say, Karim to Noon to OSN, et cetera, and all these super senior marketing roles, each organization has its own interpretation of it. And all of them, in my opinion, is incorrect. And I just want to break down why we believe most people do not deserve a CMO. Number one, the core understanding of what a head of marketing is supposed to do is inconsistent and ill-defined. So, for example, in most organizations today, not all, but in most organizations today, regional, international, a CMO does not control the fundamentals of what his role should have under its wing. For example, a CMO today in a tech business, let's say in the region, has little to no impact or decision-making power on, let's say, the product. And when I say product, I mean how it looks, how it feels, how it's designed, how it's presented as a product, how it's priced. The basic fundamental of that experience, most CMOs or heads of marketing today in tech or even non-tech businesses do not have an impact on the product. That's number one.
Yep.
Number two, in most modern organizations, there are these new functions called growth. And I was part of the era that went from marketing to growth in Karim. We introduced the growth department, and I was joined an organization like Noon where growth had nothing to do with marketing. It was a separate organization. And then I was in an organization like OSN where, growth was like everybody's responsibility, and it wasn't kind of defined to one kind of group or stakeholder. And so today, a marketeer typically has no impact on product. And because of the emergence of growth departments, most marketeers as well don't have an impact on, I would say, media or growth or performance marketing or kind of the digital representation or the front facing of your mass front facing of your product and your comms. And so if you think about the role of a head of marketing today in most modern organizations, they are in charge of, let's say, advertising. They're in charge of, let's say, PR and maybe some communication. They're in charge of a stripped down version of branding.
Yep.
And they control some of or most of the native, let's say, social media kind of channels. And they end up being ambassadors of culture more than anything.
Yep.
But on the flip side to all that, even though they are stripped down of most of their kind of roles that they should have, they are, however, unfairly given the brunt of the accountability. So if your company does not perform, if you don't hit that growth GMV for the month, the CMO is typically where the first conversations will happen. Hey, what can we do to grow more?
Yep.
Hey, what can we do? Why are customers leaving us? Hey, why is churn? What can you do to help churn? Hey, so unfortunately, they still lead and for some reason are given the brunt of the accountability of a company's performance, yet have the least impact on the levers of the growth. And so that's why we want to call this episode, You Do Not Deserve a CMO, because people hire super senior marketeers, put them in their C-suite, and then disempower the fuck out of them, yet rotate and churn CMOs every 2 to 3 years because they set them up to fail.
Exactly.
That's the introduction to the episode.
That's a strong introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Story of my career.
But yeah, look, I think it's the role of the CMO, I mean, it's changed dramatically, especially over the last 10 years, particularly the last 5 years. So there's been that complete separation or fragmentation of a CMO's responsibility and role. But then that accountability piece has always remained. So when we talk about a CMO today, still is responsible for overall, you would agree, growth. Like you are responsible for the growth of the company, right? Through marketing, but you have little control or you have influence. And this is going to be in actual fact, this is a question we'll come back to. We talk about influence, but you have little control on the product, packaging, etc. You have this growth department, which isn't actually meant to be the growth overall of the company. It's meant to be the small part of growth. How can we refine user behaviors, retention? Can we do something small there?
They're supposed to be optimizers.
Exactly. So you have these departments, and then you have say the comms team, you have the sales team, you have all of these different areas. But when you think of the role of the CMO, and this is a question for you, is the role of the CMO not just responsible for the growth, but also to influence these other parts of the organization as a whole? Because a true CMO as a whole would be someone who has these relationships across the C-suite and can then influence based on a strategy. Do you think that CMOs today have that ability to influence in a positive way?
I think hypothetically, yes, they do. But in reality, they're so disempowered, I think, generally speaking, because of the conflicts of interest of other kind of functions that have been created, right? So in any organization today, you might have, CCOs, COOs, CXOs, senior VPs of growth.
I'm thinking that Oprah meme.
You know what I mean?
You get a zero.
And when you think about all of the titles I just gave you, so VP growth, CXO, CCO, all of these titles actually overlap on one fundamental, which is kind of customer related, right? So all these guys, their role, guys and girls, their role is, a relationship to the customer.
Yep.
Right. And so is the CMO, right? And so when you overlap in responsibilities on who your main stakeholder is and what your responsibility is in that organization, then inevitably that power is kind of diffused, right? It's like it's spread now amongst like 4 or 5 different roles. And we know that organizations that have overlap, functions that have overlap by default brings complications.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you look at the maturity of organizations, at least that I've been at, we weren't in a structurally very mature place where those overlaps were very defined and everyone understood their role. No, it was quite the contrary. I mean, those overlaps just brought added confusion, and it was just kept butting heads. And then, it's just a very difficult kind of reality to kind of control. So to answer your question, like, I don't believe that CMOs today, based on the emergence of all these new functions and roles, et cetera, have the influence and power that they should in order to accomplish their responsibilities. Because
But if you go back to what a CMO is meant to be, right? Like do we have to reclassify what a CMO is? Because when we talk about CMO on demand, you've got the different kind of characteristics of a CMO. You could have a CMO that's mainly focused on growth. You could have a CMO that's responsibility is the brand, the kind of the essence of the business to make sure that it stays on track throughout its lifespan. You can have a CMO that's very customer focused, kind of very data, or even data driven. But like, if you were to if as a CEO you hire a CMO and you clearly define what that CMO's responsibility is it to uphold the integrity of the brand, or is it to grow the business? Then you open up those doors for people. The problem today is the reason there's so much churn with CMOs. No one really clearly defines that when you go into an organization.
But I don't think they're one or the other. Like, I don't believe that you can have a CMO that takes one specific approach to how he solves a problem. That's it. Like, that's, I think, what the fundamental problem is. I don't think you hire a CMO to perform one very specific function very, very well. Like, if you own the relationship and you represent your customer, you've used data to form an opinion. You've built a brand to serve them and who you are. I don't think they're one or the other. I think that whole idea of CEOs saying, this is the type of CMO that I want for my business is fundamentally the wrong approach to begin with.
But do you not think that the way that businesses are today, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, no, sure.
The conversation, but do you not think the world of a CMO today, there's too many levers like at play that can grow a company. So therefore, it's too much for one role.
Says who?
No, I'm saying like
so my point,
reason they churn.
No. So my point is the following. Like, yeah, I mean, society's changed, businesses change, how we serve customers on what platform and mediums, everything changes, right? I totally get that, but fundamentals are still the same, right? Like,
so what are those fundamentals?
So you have research and insights, you have data and intelligence, you have comms, and you have, a product funnel, right? And so all of that put together, combined to a brand or strategy, should be housed within one place. And the reason I say that is they are complementary to each other. And if you split them up into different functions, the possible breakdown in communication that will happen between those functions breaks down the ability to market appropriately.
So when you say break, and this is the thing, going back to the titles, when you break down those functions, if they all live under the CMO, it's fine. Because you have different departments that can actually optimize different parts of the business.
Sure. But
it's when there's like C-suite of growth, or and it's that split out differently.
To be clear, though, I am advocating that if you have a CMO in your organization. If you don't have a CMO in your organization, and you want to fragment it, that's fine. All I'm trying to argue, and we are arguing, is that if you do hire a CMO, and you give them that caliber of a role, they're in your C-suite, they're supposed to have influence, they're supposed to take accountability, then you need to give them the levers appropriate to give them that responsibility. And I don't believe that you can take away, data or, digital marketing or content or, any of these levers away from an umbrella of a CMO, as long as you have a CMO.
Yeah.
Like, all I'm arguing is, today, every client we have and every organization I've been a part of is always seeking a CMO.
Yeah.
We want a seasoned CMO. We need a strategic leader at the head of this table with us to advocate for the customer and to make sure that we hit our growth and marketing needs to achieve that.
Yeah.
However, they will then hire a CMO and completely disempower them and make them butt heads with the head of growth, with the head of BI and data, with the head of product, and they won't have influence on any of these things, and fundamentally they will fail.
So exactly. So what you're saying is, in essence, people, it's a checkbox. I'm going to hire a CMO because that's what I need. But I've got my head of growth, I've got my head of product, I've got my head of design, without actually necessarily thinking through the entirety of what the role and the responsibility and the objective of those two things are for people.
Yeah, fundamentally. I think a lot of times when I hear somebody say, I need a CMO, once you dig under the surface and you try to understand what problem that they're solving, it's not really that they want a CMO, it's that they want their brand to look and feel better. It's that their growth isn't hitting the targets that they want. So they're not fundamentally asking for someone to pull it all together and strategically and do it properly. What they're looking for is to serve a short-term need with a very strategic head of, which doesn't make sense. Fundamentally, you're saying, shit, I'm only growing 5% every month or every quarter or whatever. I need to be growing double that.
Yeah.
Let me bring a strategic head that can, put it all together. But in actual fact, that's not what you want. You want immediate kind of short-term results. So you bring in a person that's super strategic. They try to put in some fundamentals, process, strategy, and all of a sudden it's not happening fast enough and it's not working.
Exactly. I mean, I literally just wrote it down because I was going to say, come back to it. So we've spoken about this before as well. The short-termism of society in general today is amplified in this kind of piece, right? Because in the organizations that we've been in, there's, especially high growth, it's like weekly, monthly, quarterly planning at best. And then trying to look ahead, trying to solve problems that are right in front of you. And what you're saying is the CMOs will come in. I'm going to hire this strategic CMO who's going to fix all of my worldly problems. But I'm only going to look like a month or a quarter ahead. And then everything cascades down from there.
Exactly. Yeah. That's fundamentally the problem. And I think also one big problem is that a lot of these companies, especially startups, have first focused on growth rather than establishing the fundamentals of what they need for their marketing.
Yeah.
So you have organizations that have said, okay, I'm 2 years old now. My initial kind of, big jump in growth has started to slow down. Let me bring in a growth specialist. So they'll go in the market. They'll say, okay, I need somebody who's done growth, somewhere else. Another organization that's led growth. And that person comes in and that person looks at the business and there are no fundamentals in place. There's no planning. There's no process. Nobody knows what's going to happen next week or next month. There's no campaign consistency. There's no kind of regular view of the funnel. There's nothing in place in terms of fundamentals and basics for them to optimize on. So what happens? These organizations bring in a growth person. This growth person comes in and he's very, short term. Here's what we can do. Here's what we did in this organization. And it's very short term, like knee jerk, like
process driven, almost like here's this framework. Let me build this process. And then there's a kind of abstract base layer that doesn't really make sense for the rest of the pieces that join marketing together.
Exactly. And so when you look at all the organizations that we serve today, whether it was, big e-commerce guys that we served last year or smaller kind of marketplaces and stuff like that we serve today, it's fundamentally always the same repeated problem. It's, hey, can you come in and fix my marketing? And then we step into their businesses and they don't have marketing.
Yeah.
They have very aggressive short-term performance marketing tools and approaches, but they have zero view from a strategic perspective and consistent perspective of what's actually happening. Like who are we targeting? What is our proposition? What is the competitive advantage? What should be our pricing strategy? What's our calendar gonna look like? There's zero fundamentals in place to go and say, okay, well, maybe we can change this or change that, because there's nothing to change because everything is different all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you have organizations that are absolutely growth led, but have no idea how they grew. They have no concept of how they got to where they got. Like, oh, I did a 2-for-1 offer. Oh, I did a 30% off. Oh, I did a first ride free. Oh, I did this. I did all these things, but I really don't know why people use my product. I really don't know how I got to this many users. I really don't know. Like, I really don't know what's happening in my funnel on a regular basis. I don't know what the comms are. I don't know. I don't have anything standardized or processed in order for me to be like, this is my experience. This is my product. This is how it works. Now let me think about how I can optimize. None of those fundamentals are in place.
Yeah. So now we're getting to the meat of it. So we talk about fundamentals and planning, right? There's an allergy. I mean, certainly in the organizations I've been in and clients that we've worked with, there's an allergy to planning, like just having a basic framework and piece in place. One of the main things we talk about in DUCKLIFE is, the core, starting with the brand. Like, at least start with your brand, your mission, vision, values, customer propositions. That's your base, like the brand burger, right? You start with this and then build off from there. So
Yeah,
that allergy to planning is I mean, that's core to part of the problem.
And I think it's that startup disease. It's like, if we have a plan, if we have a strategy, then we're dead in the water. There's like this fear of having a plan. There's a fear of having a strategy and taking a minute, a day, a week, just to figure out what you're going to do next month or the next quarter. But there's a fear that you'll lose out on that energy and that beautiful chaos.
Yeah.
You'll miss out on, and you won't be competitive anymore because you have a plan.
Yeah.
Which is total fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, total bullshit. So I was gonna say, so that the misunderstanding of planning, right? Planning is like, if you have a basic framework in place, just as like a path to go to, the optimization of that plan can be weekly, monthly, quarterly, and in actual fact, it should be all three of those.
Yeah.
It should be reviewed and then optimized, and then that helps you progress. It doesn't slow you down. It just gives you kind of a a baseline to operate in. And some of the stuff that we talk about when we say planning, like when I talk about monthly planning, I want 70% of our marketing planned, right? Roughly. That leaves 30% for
Ad hoc,
growth hacking, virality, all of the other shit that comes with kind of, a perception of how do we then achieve that, the growth that we're missing.
And
and we're going to tweak it monthly.
And it's
like,
so
you're
fucking
see
crazy.
Opportunities.
Like startups yearn for productivity. They yearn for output. Yeah. We're going to beat our competition because we're working that much harder. And in reality,
harder, not smarter.
And I perpetuated it to some extent, right? Like I am.
This is a yin and yang moment.
Yeah, I'm guilty to this too. Like, but fundamentally, planning does one thing: it maximizes your output. Yeah. Why? Because you know what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. And if you know what you're planning towards and what you're supposed to execute ahead of time, you can schedule your day, your time, your efficiency.
Yeah.
Just is increased tremendously, right? Yeah. And if you think about it, if you do not know what you're supposed to do today, let's say you're a marketing department in a startup today. If you don't know what ads you're going to launch, what your proposition is going to be, what your offer is, which audience you're going after, if you don't know these fundamentals of what you're going to do today or tomorrow or this week or next week, if you don't know what your objectives are and how you're going to do it, then you're going to spend that part of that day thinking about that. And the more you repeatedly think every morning about what you're supposed to do, then the less execution you are doing on that day.
Exactly.
And so the problem with every day coming in and say, okay, what am I doing? Is in reality, you're basically exhausting energy that you could use towards executing and launching and growing.
Yep.
Right. So this whole concept of, we don't plan or you know what, we don't plan more than 2 weeks at a time or whatever, it's total fucking bullshit. Because yes, things will change, things will be reiterated, things will be optimized, even if it's 50% of your energy is planned and the other 50% is ad hoc, that's still light years ahead of,
majority.
Yeah. So it's just, it's incredible to me that, organizations will hire super senior marketeers. Every single company that we serve today, and I'm sorry for the clients that we have that might be listening to this, but you do not deserve a CMO. So stop looking for a fucking CMO. You don't deserve a CMO. If all you care about is short-term growth and you are unable, because your organization, your teams, your culture at the moment is unable to be a bit more strategic and think ahead a little bit, do not hire a CMO.
Yep.
If you only care about short-term growth, you've made promises to your investors, your competition is kicking your ass and you need to grow and you don't have the ability to sit down and relax for a variety of reasons. Not that you don't believe that you need to do it, but because you can't, then go get a growth lead. Go get, product people that can really think independently in product. But what you're going to end up doing long-term is you're going to basically build an unsustainable company in terms of growth and customer acquisition and retention, all that stuff. You're basically serving short-term needs. Yeah. And so what happens, the reason why it doesn't work, all these functions are going to butt heads everyone's going to do things their own way. The customer experience and the funnel is going to be completely disjointed, and any customers that you acquire longer term are going to leave.
Yeah.
Because somebody else in your space, in your industry, is going to do things strategically and properly, and their overall experience for their customer will be light years ahead of where you are.
Yeah.
And so, you need, just like anything, by the way, you look at product teams, you look at, tech teams and organizations, you look at operations teams and organizations, and all these guys and girls plan. You need to plan. You need to plan resources. You need to plan what you're going to develop, because everything takes time. A good product takes time, and they know that. And guess what? A good proposition, a good message, a good ad, good marketing takes time.
Yeah.
Right? And so, if you want to hire a CMO, it's going to take them 6 months to a year just to figure out what the fuck's going on in your company, and to bring in some fundamentals of process and planning and structure.
And you have to afford that time for them.
Exactly.
Upfront, allow them to have that point of view.
Exactly.
And empower them to almost set the course of the business, 6, 12, 24 months out, which is a view, and that can be adapted and optimized. But don't expect them to come in as a strategic CMO and then fix like the weekly, daily shite that your organization is trying to, go through just to meet numbers. You need the base layer there and the direction to then be able to kind of work towards.
And they need to have a voice.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So they need to be invited and allowed to speak. They need to have conversations where we can kind of poke holes at specific product issues or growth issues and have an opinion.
But that means you need, this shouldn't all be on the CMO either. So a CMO, in my opinion, they need a voice. They need to be a great people person and an ability to build relationships, because every organization has this tug of war that goes within it. But you need to be able to build these relationships. But the rest of your C-suite needs to also have those same kind of characteristics. Be able to build relationships, have influence, a fucking ability to listen. Like, it would be great if more of the C-suite actually could listen. There's always a few in there that just don't have that fundamental ability. So, when you think of it, you're constructing that kind of core team, that collaboration that kind of goes there. My function is right because it's purely data driven, or my function is right because I control the money. Like, my function is right because I'm the creative, marketing brand, guru. No, it's all bullshit. Like, everything comes together. So, without the right people in place and that, those kind of clash of heads, and then a weak CEO who can't lead that fucking team, you are set to fail for sure. I mean,
there's a lot of truth in what you're saying, in a weird way. But I'm just laughing because 9 times out of 10 we're brought in not because we have knowledge that people don't have. It's because we're able to get people to their around the table and have the conversations that are necessary. So it sucks because sometimes I used to drink my own Kool-Aid and be like, oh man, I know something that these people don't know. Oh man, we have experience and we have answers to questions that they'll never be able to answer. But fundamentally, we've realized over time that we don't necessarily have the answer that's any different than what they might have thought in-house, but they are unable to have those conversations. Or they are unable to articulate it in a way to get the buy-in across the organization. And in fact, what's happened is a lot of our customers would have been able to achieve what they did without us had they been able to just have a basic conversation amongst their C-suites or their leaders and have the ability to have upfront, transparent, honest conversations. And in truth, a lot of it goes down into the CEO. When I think about all the customers we've had, the breakdowns and the inabilities for organizations to align and agree on most things is because of a CEO who's unable to bring together his leaders, his or her leaders. And so, CMOs today, if I were to go back, 5 years, 6 years or so, I wouldn't want to be a CMO, and for the record, I landed into a marketing role. I didn't. That wasn't my dream. I'm not a marketeer by trade. Like I wasn't like trained to be a marketeer. Like I just, I can do that. It's marketing. It's easy. Anybody can do that. I had no respect for the role to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it was just hacking my way along. But
let's come back to that actually. Finish what you're saying.
But all I was wanted to say is that fundamentally, if organizations in the region, at least, if startups want to build sustainable products with good proposition and solve for the long term, not just the short term, hiring a CMO is a brilliant way to do that. So long as you have the maturity as a leader, as an organization, to give these roles, these CMOs, the influence that they need in your business.
Yeah.
And that's a scary thing for a lot of companies.
Yeah. Do you know some of the best like products or the best businesses that have had that have done, really scaled and grown? When we think of like the role, when you've got that kind of either marketing mind or design mind, like can you name products like Apple, like Steve Jobs, Airbnb?
Yeah.
You're right. Those guys, they came in like understood, from a design background, but understood, the basics of brand marketing, what you need to do. That longer tail view.
Yeah, it's the people that pulled it all together.
Yeah, they bring it all together and they build the relationship, the right culture. They have the right influence and the right conversations. But fundamentally, I think when you think about it, and the thing that I wanted to come back to was the respect that goes into what it takes to build the relationship with the customer and add value to a customer over time. So you respect the role of marketing, or you respect the role of product. You respect the role of what your growth team can do, what your BD team can do. So, when it comes to marketing, you personally find that the respect for the role is kind of not always there. So you have this kind of like, don't put all your money into creative and fluff, or, social doesn't really do anything. It's, what traffic can it drive? What does it actually do for me? But if you understand that, when you piece it all together and you bring all these pieces together, and this is, at DUCKLIFE, it's not just a creative challenge. We sometimes look at organizations, we get hired for, can you fix our marketing? Within 2 weeks, we're like, it's not marketing that's broken. We can fix your marketing and we can improve your marketing, but actually some of this budget should probably be redirected maybe towards your product or your experience or your operations, right? Don't like tell a marketeer to go and bring a fucking ton of traffic to a shit product. Like, let's fix the product.
Yeah.
Let's fix the operation. So that ability to bring it all together, which is coming back to your point around the C-suite and CEO, you have to be able to bring all of these pieces together and then know when to pull the lever down to double down on marketing, or when just to cool off and accept, slower growth for a quarter and manage your investors or manage the whatever targets you're trying to set, because the longer term view, and this is a bit of a tricky one because some companies don't necessarily have like 6 months or 9 months, but the longer term view is that if you start to fix all of those and then scale your marketing with everything else, then your ability to grow sustainably and fast in terms of that curve is going to grow exponentially. It's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally it's a societal problem, right? Everything is now, quick. Professionally, personally, I mean, everything is.
We even name companies now, like now, everything now. Fuck it. How many nows? Do you want now? Sorry, it's a low blow.
I don't know what you're talking about. I never heard of them. Anyway, but yeah, I think fundamentally the problem is the now kind of culture, right? I think the last 15 years has been about scale as fast as you can, as quickly as you can, and fundamentally we've thrown out the fundamentals of anything.
Yeah, and it really screws with creativity, the marketing role, the whole.
But it also
like value that your brand and business can bring.
But what people also don't realize is it's also been now ingrained in the mind of the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like if you're now, go, quick, and you're not really building much sustainable value, it also has an impact on what your customers expect from you and how they treat you.
Yeah.
Right? And so guess what? To grow really, really quick, you need some stupid incentive.
Yeah.
Right? You need
Oh, this is the addiction.
15-minute delivery, or free fucking first ride, or 50% off, or like there's so many unreasonable things that you've done to get that quick growth, whether it's product or marketing, by the way. You've either been able to fulfill things, light speed, or you've been able to give crazy financial incentives. Hey, it's 80% off. You're like, what the fuck? Okay, yeah, I'll buy it immediately. Yeah. So you've set this tone of urgency in the mind of consumers. And guess what? Guess what happens the second anybody else does that and you can't afford it or you can't do it just for that one day? There's zero friction now to switch products.
Yeah.
And so now, if now competes with now, then guess what? You're fucked.
Yeah.
And your loyalty is shit. And so if you don't take time to build the fundamentals of what your proposition is, how you build that kind of user experience sustainably, what you're going to communicate and where and why, if you don't build that full customer experience and journey and a strategy behind that and own it in a way that your brand feels different and is fundamentally different, right? In a way that you can defend, like nobody can replicate an Apple product. It's just not possible because there's so many pieces to that product, right? There's like the fucking tone of voice that they use, their colors, their design systems, their influence in communities, their recruitment process, their everything that they do, everything that Apple touches has its own.
I'm trying to think of
tone,
but they've got their pillars. In Apple, right? I mean, I can't remember the third pillar, but creativity, humanity. Do you know the third one?
Isn't it like innovation or something?
Something like that. But when you cut across all of their products, and this goes back to the whole brand piece, setting the tone. You can't be fucking Apple overnight. You can't be Nike overnight.
100%.
Right? But everyone wants to be that overnight.
Yeah.
But if you think back to kind of the way that they have stuck to their core of who they are and what they do, everything they do, every department, every product, every decision comes back to that core. That guides everything. And that investment, you call that planning. That was 25-year planning. I mean, we set the bar, we set the process for that, for that kind of focus. But now, today, if you are trying to achieve all of the things, you want to do 15-minute delivery. That's great. That's a superb user experience. But it can't come at the cost of just, we're going to do 15-minute delivery because we need to grow. And everything else, every other decision, we don't care if we screw the customer or the, drivers or operations or whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as we hit that 15-minute, then you're not thinking of the core aspect of kind of all the different things that can actually influence that kind of perception and growth within the brand itself. Which, again, comes to that point. If you're fragmented in your marketing and you just have someone over here fixing this and responsible for this, but you don't understand the damage it does over here, or with no one looking over it.
And by the way, I think it's so funny because if you look at an organizational structure of how the leadership structure is designed, it tells you everything about the focus of the business. So in summary, if you want to build a sustainable, successful brand over time, which customers love and appreciate you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you'll probably find a CMO in that structure. If you want to build a business, if your current motto in that business is growth, growth, growth at all cost, and you don't really tie in the functional responsibilities that a CMO should have, then you won't find a CMO. You'll probably find, chief growth officer.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think in conclusion,
just on that, before you conclude, there should be there is a disclaimer to that though. If you do want to build that sustainable view, like a CMO can have growth arm to them. A lot of CMOs today actually understand growth. But if your kind of focus is short-term exit, I'm looking at kind of a 2 or 3 year period, and you don't achieve that, then the result of just going chief growth officer, grow at all costs, we're not really thinking through longer-term strategy. In 3 years' time, you might hit that roadblock. That's where you could fail as a business.
And I'm not saying that a CMO comes at the cost of growth.
No, of course not.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, fundamentally, if you believe in the power of creating a brand, a proposition, etc., and the influence that it will have on your experience, and you understand the long-term benefits of that, you will have a CMO in your structure. You know, and what we've seen also, just we've seen that there are CXOs, chief growth officers, chief customer officers, and there's all these weird things, right? And then some organizations, you might even see them hire a chief brand officer.
Yeah.
And they're solving also short term.
You know, the whole, oh, we've got a CMO, no, we're getting rid of that role now, we're going to have a chief brand officer. That's like an acknowledgement of you're just responsible for
that's like
the brand.
Just make us look pretty, right? That's a CEO saying, oh man, our content looks like shit. Like people don't love us, you know, like just people don't engage with us. So like, can you make us look cooler? Like, oh, you know what? We need a CBO, a larger than life CBO to come in and like change our culture and our look.
Exactly.
Right? I'm just repeating what I heard many times. Anyways, but where was I going with this? Yeah, so the problem that I'm kind of highlighting as well, and I think that we should conclude on, is we're seeing organizations make up for failed marketing leadership in their organizations by trying to create these new heads of to solve another short-term problem. Oh, our brand sentiment in market is quite negative versus our competition, our culture and our tone and everything just feels kind of like off or outdated. Let's get a CBO.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, our experience in the product is kind of, you know, subpar. We don't have a holistic view of how that needs to work. Blah, 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 blah. Let's get a chief experience officer. Oh, you know, we're not growing enough and we're not doing it in a sustainable kind of way. We want someone to come in and think about growth like more holistically, to bring it all together in product, in marketing, in brand, in fucking whatever. Oh, let's get a chief growth officer. When in reality, if you have someone who can bring it all together into under one house, right? If you can do that, if you have the maturity of an organization that is ready to really mix investments in their product and in their experience and everything all together and bring it all together properly the right way, then you will get a CMO and a successful CMO, you know, in that as well. The problem that we are seeing repeatedly, and the reason we're having this episode today, is every single fucking client that we have does not have the maturity or understanding and capability to build a marketing organization within their business because they are so short-term focused that they'll never succeed. And so they always put in their scope, oh, find us a CMO as well if you can find us a CMO. And fundamentally, here's what I would say in conclusion, and I don't know if you'll agree. If you're not sure that your organization can have a CMO, don't hire a CMO. If you have any doubt. If you're going to be super short-term focused and all you can think about is growth, and you don't have the time or the luxury to think and stop and take it easy, and that's because the culture of your organization might also not be apt to receive a CMO. If any of these questions arise, do not look for a CMO because they will fail. They'll fail hands down. However, the reason we have jobs and the reason we're able to make money is because we believe that even if you don't have that, you can bring someone in and say, okay, here's who you are. Here's your brand burger. Here's your mission, vision, values, proposition, et cetera, et cetera. Here's your tone of voice. Here are the kind of frameworks and processes and tools that you can use to implement and use them as you see fit. That's why we have a job today, because we still think that there's room to have fundamentals in place, and whether you execute them wholeheartedly and at the maximum extent or not, that's your prerogative.
Yeah.
But you need to have those fundamentals in place, because if you don't put any investment or any time in any of these things, then you're basically building zero value under your brand or your business, and you could disappear from one day to the next because you have no loyalty, no standardization. Your customers don't even know what the fuck you're doing.
Yep.
They're just there for short-term gratification because what you gave them is probably cheaper or they'll get quicker than anywhere else.
Exactly.
And that's not sustainable. So you do not deserve a CMO if you do not have the balls or capability or maturity to sit down and think about what you're doing fundamentally.
I can't argue with that.
Okay, cool. I think
that's a good conclusion.
I think that wraps up the episode. All right. So respect the fucking CMO. All right. Bye.